At 18 years old, I moved to New York City and I became a nightclub promoter. And I spent the next 10 years chasing all of the wrong things, filling up nightclubs full of people, getting them drunk every night, chasing the fashion scene around the world. And I wanted to have the perfect car. I wanted to have the perfect watch. I wanted to be seen with all of the right people. And over a period of 10 years, I kind of destroyed my life. This was a picture of me 10 years later where you can see I am showing off a pretty stupid Rolex watch that I thought was important at the time to a nightclub photographer who I'd never even met. Over 10 years, I picked up a lot of bad habits, from smoking to gambling to drinking to drugs. This would be a picture of me, sometime late morning after a night of degenerate hedonist partying. And at 28 years old, I realized I'd come so far from the Christian spiritual roots I'd been brought up with. I'd come so far from the morality that my parents had brought me up. And I made a change, a radical change. I sold everything that I owned. And I said, I want to go and volunteer and see if my life could be of service to someone else. And I sold all my possessions and I joined a humanitarian mission in a country called Liberia, West Africa. And I was going to be joining a group of doctors and United Nations peacekeepers going into a country where a brutal 14-year civil war had just ended. I was living on a hospital ship, a 522-foot hospital ship with 42 beds filled with the best doctors and surgeons who had given up their vacation time to operate for free on people who had no medical care, no access to medical care. I found the country of Liberia to be a disaster. There was no electricity in the country. There was no running water. People were living in bombed out apartment buildings or houses that had once been beautiful but had been ruined after this 14-year civil war. We would look for sick people that we'd hoped to help. And our doctors specialized in facial tumors, in flesh-eating disease, and in children who were born with cleft lips and cleft palates. At the time, there was one doctor for every 50,000 people in the country. And the people that would respond to these flyers blew my mind. The third day I was in Africa, I took this picture of over 5,000 sick people who came to stand in the parking lot of a football stadium, of a soccer stadium, in the hope of seeing our doctors and getting treated on the ship. The first child that I met that day was a boy named Alfred, and he was 14 years old, and he was suffocating to death on his face because of a benign tumor that had been growing. His mom had pulled out this photo and said, at 10 years old, 4 years ago, my son was completely fine. But 4 years later, this tumor has taken over his mouth, and I'm afraid he's going to suffocate to death. There's no doctor to take him to. There's no surgeon. And that's why we were there. That's why these doctors had given up their time. And a couple of days later, I got to document this amazing 8-hour surgery as a doctor from the UK and Germany removed Alfred's tumor. A couple of weeks later, I got to take him home with his new face to his village. And I got to watch this little boy heal. I got to watch his life restored. And it moved me in such a powerful way. It couldn't have been more different than the previous 10 years of running around nightclubs, chasing cars and watches and getting drunk. That year, I took 50,000 photographs embedded with this organization as their humanitarian photojournalist. And I met so many extraordinary people that I didn't know what was next. I just wanted to keep doing it. So my second tour, I went back to Liberia for another year. And when I went back, I realized that the dirty water people were drinking in the villages of West Africa, it was making them sick. And as I traveled through the rural, remote areas, I saw people drinking out of swamps and out of ponds and out of rivers. I met a 13-year-old girl named Hawa, and I realized this was the only water she had ever known her entire life. I learned two things. I learned 50% of the country was drinking bad water, and I learned 50% of the disease in the country was caused by unsafe water and a lack of sanitation. And boy, that just hit me so hard. And the chief medical officer of the ship said, Scott, if you really cared about global health, you would use your life to bring clean water to people in need. You could play doctor to millions, maybe even tens of millions of people, just by providing this most basic need for life and for health. So I said, okay. I came back to New York City at 30 years old. I was broke because I had given all of my money at the time to Mercy Ships, the organization, and the people that I met. But I was very passionate about this life's mission. I was going to work to bring clean water to everyone on the planet. And it's a big problem as we sit here logged on all around the world. Unfortunately, 785 million people don't have clean water, especially now in this time of COVID. A tenth of the planet doesn't have the ability to protect themselves against the spread of the virus, to the clean water, the water to wash their hands. It's just inaccessible for 785 million people.